when I exit. Cool. I'll take myself out. You guys are on. Go for it.
Good deal. Well, everybody, I have the one, the only Ken Jennings from Ken's Casting Couch live with us right here on YouTube as we go ahead and hit this off. Ken, as you know, the State of Men, right? The Sean James, shout out to him. Check out his YouTube channel. He wrote a book called The Man Crisis. And there's an article I sent to you that was actually sent to me by my good friend, Bird Girl. And she sent that to me because, as you know, fatherless homes and everything that comes with it is a serious problem in our society. And Ken, I will first let you kind of introduce yourself to everybody in case someone who doesn't know about you. So go ahead.
So for those of you who haven't met me before, I'm Ken from Ken's Counseling Couch on YouTube. I'm a therapist, been doing it for a few years now. Currently not really talking much about where I work because about almost exactly a year ago I lost my job because of a bunch of people not happy about what I was discussing. So I've been a little bit tight-lipped about exactly where I work. Do a lot of work with kids regardless of where I work, but that's basically what I do. I do different types of commentary on YouTube. As you've seen, I talk about plenty of different things. I've been on Rakita's channel several times before, to say the least, and stuff like that. I don't know what else there is to really add to my resume or CV.
Though, your resume actually speaks to this topic because, as you know, a lot of people have been going haywire, right? You keep hearing in the news, and obviously, let's be honest, it is sensationalized and made to sound like it's happening much more often than it is, but it still is a symptom of a very important kind of like denigration of society, a breakdown, of course, and the very inspiration for today was from an article, like I said, that was sent to me. And Ken, I sent it to you. If you can mirror it, that would help. But if not, I will read it. It is actually from the Federalist. I don't think you can. That's right, because you're in StreamYard, so they won't let you do that.
Yeah, but I think Tim would have to be there for that.
Yeah,
Tim's not available, so
StreamYard's useless. But so for those of you who don't know, I want to read this. We'll blitz through this real quick. It is from the Federalist, right? And it's from Tim, I hope I don't butcher his name, Gogleen. And it says, the epidemic of fatherless boys is unraveling our society. Now, of course, this runs directly counter to what they've been saying about all the single moms. You know, you go girl, you can do it all on your own. Boys don't need fathers, you know, toxic masculinity, all these other things they've been pushing. So I will get right into this article. It says, new report finds that boys who have an absent father are less likely to graduate college, more likely to idle in their 20s, and more likely to go to jail. Now, that's just the start of it, because Ken, you and I both know they are much more likely to join gangs, get involved with certain agendas and their propaganda, much more likely to wind up destitute, homeless, and a lot of other things, putting hands on people. A lot of these things are all a natural byproduct. And never forget, this was socially engineered. For those people out there who think this is all just honky-dory and something just happened. No, this is all socially engineered. So, without further ado, the article reads as follows. Roland Warren, the former head of the National Fatherhood Initiative, when delivering the eulogy for his late father, said about the distant relationship he had with him as a child. I was a little boy with a hole in my soul in the shape of my dad, with unhealed wounds from years of feeling neglected and less than worthy. A recent research brief by Brad Wilcox and his colleagues at the Institute for Family Studies, IFS, on how the lack of an involved father impacts boys verifies the effects that dad-shaped hole on boys. And it goes on to show from 1960, right, the single mother-led households has doubled since 1960 from 17% to 32%, resulting in an estimated 12 million boys growing up without a biological dad. And for those of people out there who start talking about stepdads, as you know, stepdads is yet another problem in society, because that means women aren't held accountable. But that's a whole nother topic. And Wilcox writes, lacking the day-to-day involvement, guidance, and positive example of their father in the home, and the financial advantages associated with having him in the household, these boys are more likely to act up, lash out, flounder in school, and fail at work as they move into adolescence and adulthood. Hence, we as a society have been propping up girls to get in school. The entire education system has been feminized so that all you do is sit there and listen the way a girl would listen, because they view boys as defective girls now. And that's why they always prescribe them Adderall and call them ADD, ADHD. Like, well, he can't sit still. I don't know what's wrong with Johnny. Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with Johnny. He was born with a dick between his legs, right? Not a vagina. That's the problem, right? And it's no problem at all. Boys and girls learn differently, as we know. And as it goes into this article, like I said, I'm just going to skim through it. It goes to show all of the things that we already know about society. That's why we're not going to like go over it again. And it says, so often we hear from women, where are the good men who have a purpose in life, who want to be successful at work and in the home? And then instead, they see a lack of emotionally mature and stable men who are stuck in perpetual adolescence because they lack the role model of a biological father to guide them, which of course is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? The women pushed for single mother-led households by way of no-fault divorce, which was signed into law by gigacuck Ronald Reagan. When you push for no-fault divorce, when you push for a biased family court that overwhelmingly favors women, guess what you're going to wind up with, Ken? More boys raised by single moms. Well, when boys are raised by single moms and you tell a woman, hey, ladies, I want you to tell a boy how to become a man. And then see what you're getting is it's their version of masculinity and manhood, not the real version. It's their version. Thus, you wind up with what, Ken? You wind up with boys who are emotional, wind up with boys who have failure to launch, right? Mommy issues, daddy issues, all issues, because they are not being born and nurtured in a nuclear household. And Ken, I think the very first thing we have to talk about is you and I both know what is here and what is coming. And it is the crime wave that we keep seeing, right? Because you and I both know that food is going to get scarce and hyperinflation is going to worsen, right? And how do you take that? Oh yeah, Ken, you know what's coming, right? As this hyperinflation gets crazy, right? And the resources are hard to come by. We hear, especially in the major cities, right? Crime is just starting to get out of control because the policies, which are feminine policies, right? We don't want to hurt feelings, Ken. We don't want to arrest people because they're humans, and humans need to not be arrested and thrown in jail. They need to, I don't know, serve no time, never be rehabilitated, and just free to roam the streets.
I mean, have you seen that thing that's been going around the last few days of the chick whose boyfriend was shot by police, or ex-boyfriend was shot by police after the guy had come with a gun to his house, or to her house, and shot through the walls? And
yep.
Yeah, and just watching people react to that was...
Isn't and the reaction is crazy because, in this internet era, in this social media era, we get live reactions to something that just happened. Whereas, back in the day, you remember, Ken, you and I are roughly the same age. Something happened. It took a while for it to reverberate throughout home to home, town to town, society, on a societal level at large, right? Like Columbine happens. The things that happened at Columbine, we got the full story, when people were able to digest it, that took like a whole month. You remember that?
Yeah, things take a lot quicker now to happen. Like you don't have, and I think it's part of one of the issues is there's just so much easy access to information. Mm-hmm. You don't have any time to actually understand and digest what's going on. So you have...
Uh-oh. You just Skynetted. Uh-oh. Hopefully we
dozens of hours of stuff being released now for body cam footage, and it's like all the reporting, all the things, all of its history, all of it's found out within hours or days. And that's being generous. Sometimes it's quicker. And what do you do with all that information? We're a headline society. We read the headlines and we move on to the next thing. We read the tweet and we move on to the next thing. We don't read the details. We don't read the articles. Like this article here is probably a 5-minute read. Who's going to read the whole article?
Yeah, well, you think about it, Ken. We have this Thanos snap ADD kind of culture, right? Where that's why TikTok is so big, right? A matter of seconds. It's the worst thing ever. I don't acknowledge TikTok. I've never used TikTok, never will. I just think it's ridiculous. This silliness. And I want to ask you this though, Ken, in regarding to the crime waves that's incoming, right? As the resources get tight. We talk often about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and all that, right? And when the topic of, all right, Ken, if the food and beverage and food, water, shelter is not consistent, right? Then where are people going to go? Especially these boys, they're going to turn to crime to try to dominate their own environment to feel safe, to get those needs, right? Which is food, water, shelter. What do you think about that?
Well, there's at the base of everything, and that's why you see issues with, because you have to focus on your physical safety. It's at the bottom of the pyramid, right? If you cannot get the big core needs, if you can't thrive with food, water, bare minimum stuff, and then once you do that, if you're not getting the emotional needs, how are you ever going to move up the hierarchy to get emotional fulfillment or self-actualization, to be able to have a fulfilling relationship, a fulfilling marriage, a family, a kids, a career, if you're always struggling along the way, or if the emotional side is never met, if you don't get the emotional fulfillment, the emotional safety, which some people don't get, especially if you're in a single parent household, because you don't have the balance that comes with, having two parents. There's a unique balance you get having two parents, whether both are working, whether one's working, one's staying home. There's an emotional balance you get, and it even presents itself usually in homosexual relationships too, where one person will take a different role or dynamic. So it's still balanced. It still gives you kind of what you're looking for in a family. One parent is a whole different dynamic. Or if you're doing the split parenting back and forth, or if the parent's completely gone, they took off, you have, a lot of kids will blame themselves. Well, dad's not around or mom's not around because of me or whatever. Or it's my fault that dad left, or, why didn't dad want to stick around because of me? I know it wasn't worth it. And it just causes a shitload of emotional and mental long-term impacts, as well as the short-term things you see during childhood. The long-term impacts will follow themselves into adulthood often.
Absolutely. Well, you see that a lot. I've noticed that, and I think someone like Terrell Owens, the Hall of Fame wide receiver, is a great case study in that, because you look at a guy like him. His dad lived across the street. He didn't know that was his own dad. He only found out because everyone kept it from him, and he saw a girl that he thought was cute and tried to talk to her. Everyone said, "Oh, Terrell, you can't talk to that girl." He said, "Why not? I like her." And they said, "No, that's your sister." He's like, "Wait, what?" And then he found out that, yeah, it was his dad who had a whole nother family literally across the street, right? And his deep insecurities followed him. Just the same with Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was an orphan. You know what I'm saying? He was adopted. So when you start having these situations where people, like you said, people start blaming themselves. And Ken, I want you, like I said, I was starting off with crime waves and some of the things that we're going to see coming just around the horizon here. I want you to break out your psychiatrist robe and go ahead and help us to get into the mind of these youth who are causing, all of this crime, this wave of violence, especially like the mass shooter, because that's something that we keep hearing about over and over, being sensationalized in the news. So can you help us get into that mindset?
So just as a quick correction, therapist, not psychiatrist.
Therapist. My bad.
That's fine. It happens all the time. The mass shooter is a unique thing because it's a creation of the last 40 years, I think, in this country. Call it 40, 50 years, depending on how you want to round. And there's, as much as I hate the research on it, because it's done poorly, there's an interesting observation on it, because a significant majority of mass shooting is done by males. I don't remember the statistics off the top of my head on how many of them are from single parent households or single mom households. It's really high. It's
an absurd amount. I remember there was one report.
It's pretty bad.
2, and then like something else had a little lower, but like let's just say it's 80 plus, right? So 4 out of every 5, right?
Even if it's over 51%, that's because I don't remember the current how many single parent households we're talking about within where you would even so you're probably talking, it's statistically significant that there's a correlation in there somewhere. Maybe not causation, but the correlation is there to where something is happening in this household that's not setting this child up for success. Child or young adult, because some of them are young adults by the time they do this. You see that like the college shootings with Virginia Tech and other things.
Yep.
But you have people who, and unfortunately, this isn't a thing that's necessarily isolated to, I would say, a single parent household, but just any household that doesn't respect the concept of mental health. Is true access to mental health and true emotional stability is often difficult when you're dealing with core things being absent in the household. Access to funds to pay the bills, to be able to have food. You don't really have the luxury, unfortunately, it's a luxury at that point, of focusing on your mental health. You need to have that. Like, most people forget about it. Taking care of yourself, eating healthy, doing all that shit, great. But if your mental health's fucked up, you are going to put yourself in a way worse situation than if you had skipped the gym for a week or two because you needed to take the time for yourself and get better. As someone who's got my own mental health issues, I've got no problem saying that it doesn't impact my work. And if it does impact my work, or if it's going to, I take time off. So I don't, because it's not worth letting it impact my work because of what I do. But people don't get access or the ability to feel like they have access to the healthcare or just self-care that you don't even need anyone else for. One of the core things I teach in counseling is, there's internal and external coping mechanisms. External coping mechanisms are like playing basketball, going for a run, anything, things you could do, talking to another person, going to see your counselor. Internal coping mechanisms are things where if I put you in the desert naked, for example, right? Nothing with you, nothing on you at all. What do you do to deal with the stresses you're dealing with right now? How do you deal with them? How do you cope with them? And those are things that kids often don't get or develop properly. Like, I will spend hours in counseling sometimes working with people who are maybe more severe cases, but just to get a core coping mechanism or two put in place. And then I constantly teach backups. Have a backup to your backup to your backup to your backup. Because every time you think that primary one's going to work, it will fail you. And it'll fail you at the worst time. And it'll fail you when your life's on the line, or it'll fail you when you're ready to go to a school and start shooting up a bunch of kids. Because if you don't have the ability to do it then, or if that's going to be your only thing and it fails and you don't have anything else to go and fall back on, you're going to do something you're going to really regret, or it's going to end up costing you your life and unfortunately the lives of other people. So I could see how, just from my perspective, without even digging into the research, just from people I've worked with, how they're so much higher, because a lot of the kids I work with are at risk. How these kids, do they not get access to the care? Not saying that my care is the perfect care, but if they don't get access to the care, then they're not going to be able to do better. They're not going to be able to get mentally well, because they're not usually. They're using things like drugs. They're they're being promiscuous at early teenage years, sexually promiscuous in ways that adults don't normally do. And, they're not building the understandings of real relationships, healthy relationships. All these pieces are being missed. And it's just so fucking sad to see sometimes. There are days where I will leave work and I have cried driving the whole way home because it's just the shit I dealt with that day. Because it can be that overwhelming. Just seeing kids in really bad states, or sometimes suicidal, unfortunately. But,
It sounds similar to cops. You hear that with cops where, unfortunately some become, if they're, wily veterans, they become accustomed to dealing with all that. You know what I'm saying? Like, they have to, because they find their own ways to cope, right? When you're always, because, people call the cops not because they're happy. It's because something has gone wrong, right? There's been a breakdown of some form. And that's usually when the cops get called, right? We're responding to something going wrong. You see what I'm saying? I mean, and kind of like you, like I'm sure no one calls you to say, hey, Ken, I was just calling you. I'm not one of your patients. I don't know you. I just heard about you. I'm just calling you to tell you how happy I am. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, usually when someone's contacting a person like you, it's because something is wrong. Like, they're putting like let's say like, the uglier parts of the human experience onto you. And Ken, you mentioned earlier about some of these shooters and, where their mental state is. What do you think about this rise of, like, not just the mass shooter, but it's the indiscriminate shooting? You know what I'm saying? Like, back in the day, there's always been, serial killers were like the broken people of the past. But, like, other than them though, right? There has never really been a time that I can recall where people thought it was okay to just indiscriminately end other people. You know what I'm saying?
I honestly
usually a personal vendetta. Now it's indiscriminate.
Well, I would say it's honestly not. If I had to guess, again, because some of these people unfortunately don't make it out alive and you don't really get the chance to interview, is I don't know if they're rationalizing the actual shooting of a person as being okay. It's the act itself. It's I'm going to put myself in a situation where hopefully my outcome is death because I'm going to get shot in return. I don't know what's going through the mind of someone pulling the trigger behind, in a middle school and an elementary school. I can only guess, and it's a horrible thing to think about. I even don't. Then it's more of an ends justifies the means. I'm going to do this horrible thing because hopefully the police are going to shoot and kill me because that's the only way I could see myself getting out of it. Or I have this, or fuck everyone, fuck this. For example, look at Parkland. You have a kid who felt really fucked up by his classmates. Even though the kids that he shot maybe weren't necessarily ones who were responsible for it. The environment itself, it's the toxicity. It's the people there. They set it up for failure. They made sure that I was going to be destined to fail. All of these people were out to get me. You can build delusions. You can have all these other things go and take part. I hate because I've unfortunately seen kids and teenagers too in really, really bad mental states sometimes. And most of it's been self-targeted. I could only imagine what those feelings look like going targeted elsewhere, because most of the people I've worked with have been suicidal, not homicidal. And so
impulsive, not explosive. Because
and when you talk about trying to deal with that and watching these kids struggle with, there is no other, this is the word. I've gone through these horrible traumas. I've had these horrible things happen to me. And this is the only way I can see out. And, it's fucking depressing some days. But it's great when you watch them walk from the other side and come back to the light. It is the most fucking beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I've had it happen in the last month. And I put in 260 hours in June at work. Yeah, it was like 65-hour work weeks. It was nuts. I was working way more than I should have been. And I'm salaried. So it's whatever. But it saved a life and it was worth it. And watching that kid come out of that day, come out of that month that they were with us and go, they're okay. I know they're going to be okay. When they left, it was the best feeling in the world. It made every fucking stressful moment of that month just disappear. I walked out of that day and went, I don't fucking care what happens to me today because I had a good day. Because I saw someone take everything I could have asked and do well. And unfortunately, not every kid gets access to that. Unfortunately,
Ken, I want to ask you this question.
Good.
What is the line that causes it? Because I'm assuming there's a common denominator for the kids that are able, like you said, they're able to come to the light. What is that fine line between a kid who, whether it be some advice that you give or a coping mechanism that brings them over to the light, as opposed to either they don't have access to it or they reject it, and that causes them to go over to the dark and either become suicidal or homicidal?
One of the things is the hardest thing to do as a counselor, I will say. It's because I can, in the way I phrase this, I can lay everything out on the table. I can grab every handout, every exercise, everything, every coping mechanism, my personal ones I've got in books. I can throw them all on my desk and then go, which one are you going to grab? And then if they don't pick anything up off the desk, that's not my decision. I don't have this say in that. So it's the kids, when they choose to take an action, they choose to say, I'm going through this horrible situation, but I'm going to try maybe to do something different. And, unfortunately, I've been criticized for it at work for doing long sessions because it's sort of a residential place and we have access to being able to talk to them for a while. And guess what? Some kids need it because they're really don't care. But when you have that kind of severity, and you just talk to them and just let them know, look, I don't want to, because one, I use my personal story a lot. As much as I hate to talk about myself, I don't like talking about myself half the time, but I'll talk about it, how I almost killed myself more than once and how I got okay. And then I'll say, there are days that are really hard and I don't want to get up out of bed, but I do it anyway. Because, for example, it's why I'm sitting across the desk or the table from you today. And it got me to this day and it got me to this time. So I'm going to do with what I can. And you got to try and make your way through it because it's a final action when you do that. When you kill yourself, it is a final action. You cannot undo it. There is no Control Z in real life, unfortunately. You do it, it's done. It's easy to think it's the real way out. It's too easy, but it doesn't get better overnight. I'll tell you that too. You go inpatient somewhere for a couple of days to make sure you're safe. You don't feel great after you walk out of there. You still feel like shit. You still feel awful. Your life doesn't feel that much better, but maybe you have a little bit of a different renewed hope. Maybe someone gives you a different insight. And so sometimes it's just, for kids especially, it's just taking the time to really listen to what they have to say, because it's not always the way they can present it can suck because they're kids and they don't know how to do emotional regulation that well sometimes.
Yep.
But usually kids are a lot smarter than most parents and adults give them credit for. And I take that into very serious consideration when I do counseling, because I see too many kids get overlooked for how they're. I just got done working with a kid who's not even a teenager yet, basically a genius level IQ. Wow. I was so scared to send them to like a Baker Act or 5150 in a state that they were not themselves and didn't remember who they were, because I was absolutely concerned that they were smart enough to kill themselves in a lockdown facility. Because I thought, and I believe I made the right decision, I can de-escalate them here. They'll be safe here. Give me a couple hours. Yep. And they were. And so I continuously evaluated the situation, because I knew if I send this kid in this state, they're going to die. And I don't want to have that on my conscience. So I'll spend the 2 hours of my time. It was like 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning when I left work to be back at like early in the morning. It was a long night, but it was worth it, because and that was the night I cried the whole way home, because I had never dealt with something that severe. That was the fucking closest I've seen someone flirt with being that close to wanting to, because they reverted to a younger state almost. They kind of regressed a bit in both their mental state and their progress they'd made. They had basically had a dissociative episode where they didn't remember a lot of stuff about themselves, how they got there. It was nuts, dude. It was difficult. And this is a kid having this happen. It got triggered because of some trauma, and it took a few hours to work out, but it worked itself out. And they got to be safe. I didn't leave until I was sure they were safe. I was not leaving that building until I was sure they were safe, or they were leaving that building to a different facility. But at that point, it was, that was one of my nights in June. One of them. That was just one of my days in June. That was probably one of the hardest. There was another day that was really hard too, that I put myself in the situation. It worked out well, but holy shit, it was intense for those 3 or 5 minutes. It was 3 or 5 minutes of just pure intensity, seeing a kid actually get put in a situation that could have ended up horribly. And I put them there technically, and it was done therapeutically, but I watched them make the right decision. And that's how this same kid who, when they first entered our facility, history, suicide attempts, I somehow luckily caught them right before they were going to make a suicide attempt, like just by pure chance almost. And they left the facility with a renewed outlook on life. I don't know how.
Oh, wow.
But they did.
Well, I mean, that's good for that guy. And, congrats to you. I want to make sure I get that super chat from Juan for $20. Says salte. I'm assuming it must mean salute. But Ken, I want to ask you this though. You're talking about, obviously, when you're counseling with these boys, we don't ever.
I was actually a girl, but
it was a girl. Oh, okay, wow.
Yeah.
Damn, that's definitely rare. I'm assuming. For people that come over.
I mean, girls. Younger and preteen and teenage girls do have decently high incidences of suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts. I mean, it's unfortunately, I'll tell you this, and it's going to make you feel horrible. Every year, about 4,000 to 5,000 kids kill themselves. It's the second leading cause of death for kids, besides accidents. Higher than cancer, heart disease, all that shit combined. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for adolescents. It's horrible. Yeah, it's bad.
That's beyond awful, because especially because you have so much more life to live, and this goes back into something that is the there's a greater construct at play here, right? And in terms of like how we're raising these kids, how we're treating, especially the boys, because like I said, we have a society that basically is always trying to put down the boys while it's usually bigging up the girls. Like, yes, you can, while telling boys, you ain't shit. So, we can go all across the spectrum, right? We have the media, how boys and men are treated in the workforce, at school, online, in the home. You know, you have commercials always making sure the guy is a doofus. He's an idiot, right? He's a buffoon. Society at large, and you know, there's, you know, when you kind of get into this space where you're always being demonized, right? I think that causes a lot of people to check out. And you know, Ken, I want to ask you this: when we look at like the natural human response, right, to feeling isolated, ostracized, you know, or, you know, let's say you're psychologically abused, what is your take on that? That like a lot of these people who are getting thoughts, whether it be homicidal, suicidal, whatever, do you think that that's almost like a, I hate to use the word natural, but a natural like cope for the fact that how they feel inside of being so so lost? Do you think that's what it is?
I mean, if you want me to be really depressing for a minute, do you really want to live with people who don't want to be around you?
Yeah, I know, right?
Like, think about being a teenager for a minute, and a bunch of people don't like you, and they make fun of you. I mean, I was bullied. I almost lost my right eye because some dude in 7th grade kicked me in the face with steel-toed boots over a chip bag.
Oh.
Yeah, legitimately, that's the story. It was really bad. It could have been worse. But you've seen me. I turned out okay. I'm not the worst ugly specimen out there. But people do shit like that, and you will feel isolated amongst your peers. Even the people that you trust and are close to, you could still self-isolate because you'll start convincing yourself, well, if these other people don't like me, my friends might just be playing a game, or maybe they're fucking with me, or maybe this is a game. And unfortunately, teenagers are twisted sick sons of bitches sometimes. Middle schoolers, for example, I call them evil because middle schoolers are evil. Because that's where you start hitting that part of development cognitively, where you just start doing some really fucked up shit sometimes. And a lot of it's bullying. A lot of it's doing really mean things where you'll pretend to be friends with someone and then pull the rug out from under them and just drop them and leave them. That shit causes damage for years sometimes if people don't have the right supports in place. So I don't believe it's uncommon for people to, you know, especially kids, to be like, this is where I can't imagine, what am I going to do with my life if everyone here hates me? How am I ever going to get a job? How am I ever going to be successful in life? Who's going to want to marry me? Who's going to want to have kids with me? Like, all of it just starts cascading on one another. And so suicide or doing something to get revenge is, some people internalize the pain, some people externalize it. Sometimes they'll respond with, bullies are usually either have been bullied themselves or dealing with a lot of trauma or issues on their own life. So they externalize their pain and they put it on other people. Is it the right way to do it? No, but it's what they do. So how do you turn it around? That's not always the easiest thing to do. It's finding the people, if you're in a situation where you have that sitting in front of you, there's like a couple things that are like the magic words you can use in a situation that will automatically help win you some respect from people, no matter how much they may not like you. And legitimately, one of the best things you can say to someone who's in a crisis is, I can't imagine what you're going through right now or how that feels to be like that. Like, I can't imagine what it's like. Tell this to a teenager. I can't imagine what it's like right now to feel like all your friends hate you and all this shit's going on, and that the only way out feels like killing yourself or wanting to go shoot up your school. That feels awful. And just being real about it. I do that. Unfortunately, as depressing as it is sometimes, I'm very forward in counseling. I'm very truthful in counseling. I don't keep shit from my clients. I'll tell them, this sucks. Your life seems to suck pretty bad at the moment. From what you're telling me, that's horrible. I would not want to go through that. And I'll tell them, I could not deal with that. I'd have done something horrible before now, because that's just way too much stress. And that's me, and I'm an adult. I couldn't imagine being 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, doing the same shit. And when you do that, it puts some realism in the fact that, yeah, they're hurting, but then you can start the whole process of, you're hurting, but you can make it hurt less. Mm-hmm. You can let yourself have more control. And unfortunately, emotional control and regulation, one, most parents suck at it, so they can't teach it right. I'm a counselor, and I don't do the best at it some days. I can teach it great, but personally, I could suck at it. But that doesn't mean I don't know how to put the right things in place to help others. A lot of times parents will revert to the way they grew up, and there's a lot of resistance to like new versus old school things, this versus that. I know like an example to not go into, but like beating your kids, the pros versus the cons, spanking or whatever it is, like things like that. people will argue the goods and bads for it. And I mean, unfortunately, some of those things that parents will rely on, they'll fall back to because they think it worked for them, maybe when it really didn't. I know some of the things my parents did I would never do. You know, some of the things that, you know, while I've dealt with them as an adult, my God, as a kid, they really ate me up. And I would never put a child in that situation, ever, because I knew what that felt like, you know. And some parents, unfortunately, justify it. Some teachers justify it. Adults, role models, will justify their behavior because they think it's the way to role model.
Well, unfortunately, no one has a crystal ball, right? Because, like, you know, I think back to like my own childhood and people I grew up with, and it's like, you really don't know, right? Because I mean, I think parenting in and of itself is kind of like a crapshoot, right? Like, you don't really know, like, and you, I'm sure, like, obviously you've dealt with lots of kids. If anyone who's ever been around kids, they realize really quickly what works as a form of discipline for child A doesn't always work as a form of discipline for child B. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could just like scold this kid, right? And then they get it, right? They start crying and they get it. The other kid, because they're more defiant, you have to, you know, be much more direct and much harsher with them. Like I said, there are some kids, man, like I remember growing up, you had to whip that ass. It is what it is. People can sit there and say, well, Drex, that's a horrible thing to say. Some kids, that's just how they learn, right? I mean, it's the same way. I mean, if you ever, you know, military, sports, different discipline tactics are essential. Because if you say, all right, Ken, every kid on earth is going to respond to this one form of discipline. No, they won't. You know what I'm saying? Just like the way that we learn.
Oh yeah, I'm smarter than that. You could tell me that I don't know a shit about psychology, and say, oh, everyone's going to respond to the same form of discipline. No, but I can tell you that I am very much against anything, because my personal philosophy is, in the way I approach counseling, and is a parenting philosophy too, is that if you have to use the threat of physical violence to get your child to listen to you, you're failing somewhere along the way. Is the way I look at it. Because think about it. Do you really want to have to like raise the rod and go, I'm going to do this? If you don't, you know, I'm going to spank you. I'm going to grab the stick or the paddle. I mean, it's no different than, you know, I'm going to knock your shit out if you don't do what I tell you to. Mm-hmm. As an adult, to someone, like, do you want anyone to treat you like that? Do you want to be, and yes, there is a bit of a difference between, depending on the age, youth, and learning and how they learn, and knowing how kids learn and how they think is probably one of the most impactful things you can do, because the different ages and the different stages of cognitive development are so crucial to understanding. Because some, you know, for example, you have concrete thinking at younger ages, then you start to get operational thinking, where you can start to, and then you get into the age right around certain parts of the teenage years or early teenage years where you can actually start to think about thinking. It's called metacognition. And when you can recognize where your kid's at, you can tailor your discipline to that, because some things are more direct. You have to do more direct because you can't, you know, have a same conversation like we're having and rationalize it with a 3-year-old. Mm-hmm. You have to be more direct on certain things. You have to use specific language or specific actions to get the message through. Also, sometimes doing things that seem counterintuitive are sometimes more effective. You know, if you have a very defiant child and you know, you start to escalate, start to get more upset yourself. You think, you know, spanking them, or some parents, unfortunately, beating them, it's going to help. Try going the opposite direction, because they're probably expecting it at that point, because it's probably a learned behavior. Do something different. Do something else, because one, what do you have to lose? They're already fucking not listening to you. Yep. You know that if you're going to get to them to listen, normally you have to go to X point, and if X point's spanking or hitting or whatever, or, you know, and not that those are things you should do, but some parents do, but, you know, try something different. Also, obviously not in the middle of a crisis, believe it or not, having your kids invested in their own discipline and having a voice in it was one of the things I tried as a test case once, and I was like, let me see if this will work. And it was a fucking genius idea. And it was basically, all right, mom, dad, kid, we're going to sit down, we're going to figure out what the discipline is in your household. What are the rules, and what's the punishments for not following those, or the consequences for not following those? What are the good consequences? What are the bad consequences? So you're supposed to, you know, is it, and because it's important to know what your kids are actually capable of. So, for example, if you and I think taking the trash out is a stupid, easy thing, oh, you can take the trash out, it's not a big deal. So my kid can take the trash out. However, regardless of their age, the kid can take the trash out. Okay, well, what if the kid? Well, no, I don't. I can't pick it up, or it bothers me, or I have an issue, and it's really hard for me to do. Maybe I can do it once a week, but I can't do it every day. And you get their feedback, then it's something you can work with them to improve on, versus just assigning this expectation that they can't meet, because then you're setting them up for failure, which then sets the household up for failure, which sets the family up for failure. So I can do the dishes every day. That's easy. I do that all the time. I mean, I miss some days, but I can do it all the time, and I'll do that. I can do that. And if I don't get my phone for a day.
Yep.
And I agree to that. And if the kid agrees.
Now, Ken, it's funny you say that about like positive, negative consequences, because one of the things that I've seen, whether it be guys who went their own way, the herbivore male, I'm hearing stories out of China now with the youth are saying let it rot, and I think that's because their sacrifices have not netted them a positive gain, right? They haven't netted them positive consequences. So it's like, as people start to say, well, what's in it for me? Which I think is a very human thing to do. Because if you tell somebody, hey, Ken, I want you to sacrifice, and the person goes, okay, so what do I get out of that? You go, no, nothing. The person's not going to be inclined. And that's kind of what you were going into saying. It's like, I want you to do X. And if you don't do X, here is punishment Y. Eventually that's going to turn people off. And I've started to see that. And it kind of goes into one of the issues that I've always had, and I've seen this since I was a kid, which is socially engineering masculinity out of boys and men. Because we talk about the low testosterone, right? The guys today have lower testosterone than their 90-year-old grandfathers, great grandfathers, right? And I think there's a demonization of masculinity, and also a gray area in what is considered consequences, right? Because Ken, you've seen this. A person could do, person A, right? Like we'll use, let's say Amber Heard, right? Amber Heard versus Johnny Depp. What the world saw with on the, this is like the world stage, right? Everyone can see this. They're like, wait a minute. People noticed. They were like, I don't think Amber Heard's ever been held accountable ever, right? Because Ken, when we were growing up, if your parents would let you know, lying netted a consequence, right? Like you weren't allowed to just lie or blame someone for something and then nothing happened to you, right? Like that just didn't happen. You weren't allowed to put hands on people and nothing happened to you. So one of the issues that I've seen is they're basically trying to say that like the things that make you, masculine or things that make you feminine, because I mean, girls are feeling the effects too. And they're basically saying being masculine is wrong, is the way that they're telling boys, and they're telling women being feminine, being your natural feminine element, your natural feminine instinct, that is wrong. But what people are saying is they're always hearing about what something is wrong, but they're never seeing like the positive consequences of doing it, quote unquote, the right way. Do you think that's kind of like something that we're seeing more in society?
Well, I mean, the thing is the right way is subjective too. As far as what's right for your family is going to be different than my family.
Yep.
Is different than the family down the street. And they can sometimes be flipped completely. Like the things that you do in your household might be completely different than, say, Nick's household, right? I'm sure the things you guys both do as parents has some overlap, but maybe the way you handle your daughter's stuff is different than the way he handles electronics with his kids. Because it just doesn't work because your kids are different. Because there's biology and there's environment both at play. So... But one of the things that I that is the biggest thing I teach outside of safety is accountability and responsibility in counseling, because you have to be able to hold yourself accountable, because that's how you can make changes and accept fault when you make mistakes. Because I one of the things I do in my very first session is every single time I go, I take everything you tell me basically is the truth, unless I have a really damn good reason not to. Because one, it's unethical for me to do so, to just start assuming you're lying without any proof. Two, it doesn't really help the relationship here if I'm just assuming you're lying out the gate. So I have to take that you're going to take this opportunity to tell me the truth. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to make fun of you. I'm not here to go, I make my own mistakes. I probably made 3 before the session started. And I'm hoping that you'll take the opportunity till I earn your trust and you share more stuff with me over time. And so I get that you may not share as much with me. You may share a little bit more as time goes on. And it's an opportunity to where I just want you to own up to it so we can figure out what to do. People have told me some really dumb shit they've done or some really horrible shit they've done in counseling or some really horrible shit that's happened to them or whatever it is that maybe they're at fault for, maybe they're not. The point is them just owning up to it deserves a positive response. Is even if your kid does something stupid, breaks something, whatever, but they take the accountability and go, Mom or Dad, I broke the thing. I did this. I hit Sally or whatever, and that's why their nose is broken. And they did it without having to have you do a bunch of interrogation, or you did a brief interrogation or whatever. So, okay, who did this? Okay, it's me, I did it. And it's not just to try and avoid trouble, but for the true purposes of accepting responsibility. That is reward. That's something worth rewarding, because that's the thing you want out of your kid. Your kids are going to make mistakes all the time, and you shouldn't really beat it into them that, you know, you're going to be perfect. I don't expect perfection of my clients. I'm not perfect for damn certain. So I'm not going to ask anyone to do anything more than I can do. I think that's a fair expectation in counseling. But to have the ability to be more open and honest, and I always try to aim in family stuff too, is to be able to feel more comfortable with your parents, to just share with them. And like, if they tell you, you know, when I was back in private practice, I had a kid who was barely teenager at the time, who had during COVID been messaging people online. Some people ended up taking advantage of him. And so they ended up sending a few pics or something that they weren't supposed to. Yeah. And so, but they were also, the parents had at that point pulled them out of school. They were being socially isolated. The parents were like, no social media, none of this. So what are they doing? Going behind the backs, doing things they're not supposed to.
Yep.
And so they don't have that openness. So I get it out in counseling. Hey, this is what's going on. Because the kid was a runaway risk and some other stuff. I get things out about what's going on. And then by the time I'm done with that family, or by the time I was fired because I was still working with the family, this is a family where the three of them could sit down and, yeah, they still had issues, but the kid felt comfortable saying, hey, you know, this is what's going on, or I'm having issues with my friends, or there was a complete 180 in the dialogue in that family. And that is a bigger change than any individual punishment, than any individual issue. Unless your kid puts someone or you or someone else in the hospital or on a deathbed, nothing else is beyond repair. Like, you could pretty much fix a lot of things, or they can be dealt with in ways that don't, because if you start really laying into them, oh, why would you do this? This is fucked up. This is the worst thing you could do. You're going to cause more harm. You're not going to really make a change. It's better because, one, you'll surprise them if you go, okay, and just leave it and just like, all right, I appreciate you doing that. I appreciate you getting up for it. We'll talk about later. We'll talk about it as a family. What's the right answer, and what's the right consequence for your negative action? Because it was important that you owned up to it, and you should have a say in what that consequence is going to be. One, you'll shock the shit out of them the first time you do that, and they don't expect it. Two, they get a say in the process, because then they get to learn, I did X wrong, and this was a reasonable consequence for it. So they can learn what is a reasonable consequence for doing things in the future. Because if you set unreasonable consequences, then you're going to have unreasonable behavior from your kid, because they're going to know, oh, if they're just going to take my phone, if I just say the F word once for 6 months, I'm not going to, I don't care. I'll just sneak a phone in. I'll have a friend buy me a track phone. I don't care. Fuck everyone. Fuck these hoes. Fuck my parents, whatever. And so they'll do that versus, okay, you said the F word, 20 minutes of phone time gone, 30 minutes of phone time gone. Put it down. You come back and get it later. Okay, I agree to that. That's fair, because I'm trying not to cuss as much. I know I shouldn't cuss because I'm a kid or whatever. Doing something like that gives you.
Ken, I want to say this though, in regards to that mindset. The key issue I have with that is that I believe in a much harsher reality, and there's a reason for it. It's because I know how the world is much harsher. So this is what I mean by that. If someone says I can negotiate my punishment or my consequences, right? If you and I both know, in the corporate world, right, in the business, in the real world, right, once you grow up and you're a full-grown adult and you are in the workforce, you don't get to negotiate shit, right? Like, you don't get to go in and go like this, hey man, I know I was late like a whole lot of times and I was punished for it, but let me explain why, you shouldn't really discipline me. They're gonna look at you like, no. Like, This is the corporate policy. You see what I'm saying? Like in the military works that, or used to work that way before it got cucked. And the reason why I say these things is because you and I both know, Ken, you've heard some of these horror stories, right? Like people doing things to people. There have been people who have pranked other people who have ended up in a pine box, right? Because the person doesn't know that that's a prank. And so going out in the real world, this is the reason why I am 100% pro physical discipline for that reason. Because I was like, in the real world, everything is direct and it is immediate, right? And like I said, I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. What I'm saying is, in the real world, you always face consequence. Like I said, if you go up and run your mouth to somebody, a consequence could likely happen, right? Usually physical. You see what I'm saying? If you are at work and you've heard zero tolerance policies in the workforce, right? Like,
oh yeah,
certain like language or certain things. I've seen people. I've seen this with my own eyes. I have seen people fired just like that, right? They don't get to negotiate their, my punishment or let's talk about it. No, there's like this. Oh, what does the policy say? See, that's why I believe in having these hard lines so that way, when a kid grows up, they've been in this box, right? And they go like this. I'm allowed to do all of these things outside of the box. However, for certain behaviors, I know what I can and can't say, what I can and can't do. You see what I'm saying? Like, I've seen people in the workforce sending nudes to other coworkers and stuff. They were fired, right? Like, what are you thinking? You see what I'm saying? Like, you don't get to negotiate. And the reason why I bring all this up is because one of the issues I have in your profession, right? This is from an outside looking in, right?
No, you're good.
The world of counseling, clinical counseling, psychiatry, that whole realm, right? I kind of put them in their own little corner, right? One of the issues I have is that they seem to deem masculinity itself, right? All forms as toxic. And they try to redefine terms like traditional masculinity. And so I'm just kind of looking over my shoulder like, hold up. The military doesn't look better today than it used to. Boys don't look better today than they used to. Because if they did, women would be into them. Women are saying, we don't want this crop of males, right? And I bring this up because, I mean, at the end of the day, we got food turning dudes. The Alex Jones famous quote, right? Stop putting the chemicals in the water that turns the freaking frogs gay. Things like that. We got hormone blocker drugs. We got people out here making women more masculine through social programming. And I bring this up because it's really simple. They're trying to say what traditionally makes a man. Because you and I both know, Ken, if you wind up in a war, right? A real war, not a Twitter beef. In a war, this is a shout out to my man Ty Beard and guys like his uncles, because my uncle served in wars. My brother's in Kuwait right now, right? He's in the armed forces. When it comes time, you need masculine, strong men. You don't need beta cucks. You don't need guys who want to talk about, I want to talk about my feelings, because the enemy doesn't give a fuck about your feelings. You see what I'm saying? They will yeet you, right?
So I will make the argument that if you're at that point, I would say if you look at it, and it's maybe a bit of more of an abstract idea, but we apply the ideas of the Maslow hierarchy on an individual level, right? Mm-hmm. Apply the same concept on a country or societal level, right? Yep. If you're at that level of a war, you're no longer, because as a country right now, we're supposed to be at working on self-actualization is the goal. Is the country is supposed to be, we're the number one country. We've done all this, we've got all the things. And we're supposed to be working on that as a society, quote unquote, right? That's why we're able to do all the little things we're doing and put, like you said, picking out what is masculinity and all this other shit, because we have the luxury of it, because we're higher up the food chain on that.
Yep.
If you're going to war, then those luxuries go away. So right. I would say that it's not necessarily the equal comparison, because you're now at a point where you don't have the luxury to worry about those things. So they no longer stay at the top of the food chain. So because that's what you're working on, that's what you can work on. So you need to come, either A, bring the concept up, or bring the society idea down. So if we're coming down the chain to physical safety, because that's what the bare minimum is because of a war, to keep, everyone's safe and to keep the country intact, then everything else kind of takes the wayside. You don't have the opportunity to really deal. That's why you deal with war during war, and unfortunately, you deal with the fallout of war after it with PTSD and veterans and all that shit. And so it doesn't have that real luxury they try to do it now, but you don't have the luxury really to deal with it during the course of war, in the middle of combat, because you've come down to the bare minimum.
But Ken,
So
right now we're in a culture war, right? So what we're in right now is the reason why, they're trying to say, you get canceled if you got my pronouns wrong, blah 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 blah. You got a bunch of weirdos. You got the slut walk. You've got pride parades where they have children around naked dudes in gimp suits and shit. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. What I've noticed is that there's a lack of fight, right? There's a lack of fight in these modern dudes. Like a lot of dudes sit there, like I said, I have noticed that I will say something, right, on record with my face shown in the camera like I'm doing right now, right? And I will show something to somebody like this. You guys don't see a problem with this. And Ken, rather than someone going, yes, Drex, I do have a problem with 10-year-old kids being told by the whatever organization to get put on hormone blockers or whatever, and they're pushing propaganda. Yeah, Drex, I have a problem. No one says anything. I look around going, no one's gonna say, no one's gonna do nothing, because in a culture war, you don't fight physically. It's more of court cases, policies. You hear all these things that are done. That's how a culture war. So kind of like when we talk about the Cold War, right? It's not like, with actual arms and nukes being launched. And when I look at the modern man, right? Let's look at the modern man versus 100 years ago, right? And none of this would fly, right? We're talking about in terms of culture and society at large. The things that are flying right now today, right? In terms of the way men and women and boys and girls and family is set up and how they are behaving, none of this would be allowed 100 years ago. That would have been, 1922? None of this would have been allowed. I promise you that. And, the reason why this is such a big deal is that, like, society misses out, women miss out, children miss out. Everyone's missing out because they aren't supporting what men, the standard what men used to be. Because I've always said that the reason why I bring war into the picture is that when a societal breakdown happens, when you implode, right, you're always going to be invaded by someone who is lower tech than you. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. A lower tech society will invade you, but guess what they have that you don't? They have masculine men who want to come in and take shit, right? Which is a masculine principle, right? For a masculine principle of survival, it's to take. A woman's feminine imperative of survival is to do what? Use sex and sexuality manipulation to open up, to get resources so that she can survive. Men go and take it directly. And now we have dudes that are going like this, oh no, don't do that, but you got my pronouns wrong. And they beef on Twitter and they run their mouth because it's more about how they feel, how they want to talk. Nobody wants to do anything. And you're seeing it now. All you hear about now is what, Ken? You hear women complain day and night about, damn, where's all the men? Where's all the guys that we want, right? And then what happens? Like I said, when you hear about these mass shooters, gangbangers, this is all feminine behavior. Do you know what? Have you ever been around thugs? They got to be color coordinated. They got to wear jewelry. This is all feminine. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, man, I got to look fly and fresh. Wait a minute. Ken, you know how men think. Men think in terms of utilitarian, right? We buy things based on function. That's why men don't shop, men buy. It's a direct action. We go like this.
Like,
hey, kid,
I buy a 3D printer that can make 3D printed guns. So that way I have utilitarian ideas.
It's utilitarian.
So I have it's a $200 printer I can make a bunch of shit with that.
Absolutely.
I can make coat hangers with.
But that's how guys think, right? Like you go like this. I am presented a problem, right? Problem A. All right, this is solution X, right? Like that's how guys think. But now dudes are out here more concerned about what hair dye they're using, if you got their pronouns right on their Twitter bio, all this other stuff. And it's like you're starting to see though, right? Is that governments are pushing for this because they're going to get stronger with the lack of masculine men, right? And we're not producing them. And I've always said that's a problem because I look at it like this. The rainbow agenda, the far left policies, right? All they're going to do is they're going to enable and embolden, right? More people who are kitty diddlers, as we keep seeing legislation keeps on going to, you know what, Ken? Pedophilia is actually a sexual preference. No, it's not. No, it's not. Because see, when people start doing this whole thing where they keep trying to stretch and pull society to the absolute brink, Once again, this is war. It's a culture war. And the only thing that stops everything you see when people say, "Man, Ken, don't you want to live in a society where there's a bathroom that says men, there's a bathroom that says women, and people know what the hell is which, and they just go to their appropriate one, and they don't bitch and complain online all day? Don't you want to have that kind of society? Don't you have a society where the dating market is normalized? It's not like Ken, you and I both. No one can deny what's going on.
My personal ideas are, and it's something I teach in counseling, and it's something that's just a general idea, is I don't really give a shit what you do in general, as long as it doesn't impact my safety or the safety of others around me, and it doesn't cause you harm. I do not literally give it, and I've had clients of all different backgrounds, all different perspectives, even though I've been I've accused of racism in my practice. I've been accused of other things. None of it ever comes to fruition because I don't care, literally. I literally just want to make sure you get the help you need and you get out the door. Other than that, I do not care what you choose to do with your life as long as it's not going to be a negative. So for the people who want to do whatever else that is, say, the opposite side of where you guys sit, where this side of the internet sits, versus, where a lot of society sits right now, where, like a lot of my career field sits, very left-leaning, probably more than just left-leaning.
Far left.
I'm very far left-leaning, but
Ken,
even
what you just said though, right? They are pushing on other people, right? Because they're coming after children now.
You're pushing your ideas on other people, though. Does it still count?
No. Here's the thing, though.
Why
I never said a kid should be put on hormone blockers. I never said they have to identify as X, Y, and Z. Right? I never said that. What I'm saying,
you didn't say that, but if someone says that, that's a whole show and a half I could do, because I've already done shows on that one.
Oh yeah, I know, right? But Ken, here's one of the issues I have. When someone says, Drex, you're pushing your agenda on, I go like this. Hold on. You're telling me that a kid can't join the armed forces, they can't have a drink, they can't do there's all these things they can't do, right, at a certain age. However, Ken, the far left says, but you can go ahead and say that you're this gender, and we can start doing things to your body that can cause irreparable psychological damage, emotional damage, physical damage. And I'm saying, let's keep the person intact to who and what they are right now until they are able to make that decision. Well, guess what? Wouldn't that decision make more sense when that person is able to smoke, drink, go to a club, go get insurance?
Well, I mean,
that would make logical sense. You see what I'm saying? They're not a minor.
Well, on that specific topic, you're not supposed to be having, and if you're getting any,
that's what they're doing, man. Hold on.
The thing is if that's happening, it's happening outside the law, because or if
they're not punished. Look, Nick Recated himself.
I'll agree with that. I think they do need punished, because there are standards. Just like if I do anything unethical, it's supposed to cost me at least a reprimand or potentially my license permanently.
As it should.
As it should. Yep. Because I can walk into a therapy session, and in 3 sentences I can scar someone for life. It doesn't take much. All I got to do is say the right thing to the right person, because unfortunately I know a lot of the people I work with, their deep-rooted traumas, all the horrible shit that's happened to them. I walk into a session and go, again, as an example, oh, you deserved all that horrible shit that your parents did to you as a kid. You think I'm going to do damage? Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
And I should hell as much be reprimanded for it. Not that I've ever done that, nor would I ever. But that's something that deserves reprimand. And it's not...
But Ken,
there are standards in place,
are going to grow up, though.
And I agree with that, and I agree that we should be pushing for enforcement of the standards properly, because there are ways to deal with these issues. You have, the psychological issues that get people into that type of treatment. There are standards in place that were developed by a body that is surprisingly diverse with regards to how to deal with the treatment, even with severe societal pushback on saying, remove the barriers. They've kept a lot of them up for really damn good reasons, especially with relating to teenagers and kids, because there is safety reasons for that. So the body that's put in place the standards has said, we're holding on to these for a reason at this point, right? I know there's a new standard coming up soon. I still think they've held really good on the line, but it's not the body's fault. It's not the standard creating body's fault that the lower people, just like it's no different than if the federal or state governments put in place laws and the local people aren't dealing with the enforcement properly. So we're having issues with enforcement of how we're supposed to do it. You do have bad therapists doing things, and I will be the first to say there are therapists who push the boundaries of what they're doing. Yes, we're supposed to, by ethical code, at least in my profession, because I'm a social worker, we're supposed to do what's effectively gender affirming care. But one of the fucking things I do with any kid that I have that's trans that I work with is what happens if you go all the way and nothing feels better? Are you going to be okay with that? Because I want them to have the realistic expectation. So,
but Ken, let's be real. Most of these people, they're problematic to begin with. Look, we got to start. Like I said, this is the problem I have. Nobody wants to be honest with people anymore. Like, look, there's a lot of people, right? And that shout out to Cress, who is trans. Shout out to our girl Cress. But she talked about the whole, I guess there's like a holiday-ish kind of thing, like national like detransition day. And you hear all these stories. These were people who already were problematic and had mental illness issues. You see what I'm saying? And they were like, well, Ken, going to this level will be the solution, right? And then they got to that point. This kind of goes to what you're saying. And then like it still didn't quote unquote fix their problem, right? And
no, it's not going to fix it by nature of the problem.
Absolutely not.
I get what you're saying.
You need to be right yourself. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me when people say like, well, Ken, you are what makes me happy, right? Your job is to make me happy. It's like, no. This person, whoever is saying this to you, they need to be happy themselves and not be relying on an outside source for happiness and or fulfillment. And the reason why I bring this up is because a lot of the agendas that are pushed, I've noticed they really want to push this. This is why they wanted to break up the nuclear family, because it's easier to push an agenda without, once again, the strong masculine father. I'm not going to allow fuck shit. I told you, Ken, I was at Nick's house and my daughter had worn some shorts that they didn't pass the Drex test. You see what I'm saying? They don't pass the dad test. Do you know whose test they always pass? Women's tests, society's tests, because there's no rules anymore, right? Do you know what dads want to do with their daughters? They want to prepare them to be good women and good wives. You see what I'm saying? We don't prepare them to wear thought uniforms. When men select clothing for their daughter, they're going to be covered up. They're going to be right. You see what I'm saying? Real men. I don't mean these weirdo beta cucks. I don't mean dudes out here who are diddling kids. This is all beta behavior. These are dudes who are bitch made. You see what I'm saying? Guys like myself, guys like Nick, guys like Ty Beard, we don't allow any of this. You see what I'm saying? We don't allow thirst traps to be posted online. And what I'm starting to see, though, Ken, is that a lot of the single parents who are raising boys and girls, like I said, more often than not, is going to, like I said, custody is usually primarily afforded to the women. They're not asking for that outside help. They're like, well, I can raise this kid all by myself, Ken. Whereas, like, if a guy is a single dad, he doesn't walk around saying, I know every single thing about women and I know how to raise my daughter. They're going to like this. They're going to defer more often to women, like whether it be a mom, which would be the grandmother to the kid. They're going to start deferring to other things. Like, hey, man, there's certain things about women, about growing up as a female, I don't know. Because men understand. They're like, hey, this is all about empathy. I can't ever be a woman. I believe the best thing to do is to put them around women who I believe are well adjusted to help them grow into adulthood, which in this case would be womanhood, right? Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that is stunting that growth, Ken, it's social media. Because what I want your take from a counselor's view. What do you think about social media's impact on young and older people now? Because I'm seeing some old hoes on social media, Ken, twerking, talking crazy with eggplant emojis, and these chicks are in their 50s. So like I said, I'm not saying the dudes aren't doing weird stuff on TikTok too. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, I'm sure there are, but like, what is your take just on social media and how it is now impacting, the old and young generation?
Well, the thing is, social media has, and I see it with the kids I work with, is there's such a huge influence that social media comes. There is, unfortunately, like I said, I hate TikTok for more than one reason. Yep. One of those reasons is the expectations and requirements that the kids specifically feel they have to do. They have to be part of that. They have to do the things. They have to participate because it's the new playground. It's the new town square. Is TikTok and Facebook? Well, not necessarily Facebook anymore, but Instagram and all the other shit. All of it is basically that. And you have older people trying to fit in, who are at the cusp of where they're not so far advanced that as far as age-wise and their cognitive age and stuff. And they can't figure out how to deal with it. Like everyone has smartphones now. You don't have too many people with straight up flip phones anymore. Everyone's learned to deal with living with a smartphone at this point, basically.
Yep.
So you kind of get forced to learn how to do it. You have kids who are like 8 years old that are like stupid smart, like, oh, this is how you do it real quick. And the grandparents like, how the fuck did you do that? And, right. But they're learning through that exposure. And so they're now participating in it's new to them. It's no different than the kid the way I would look at it, it's no different than the kid who is now getting exposed to social media for the first times in their life, those years, the specifically formative years of this is what I have to do. This is social. This is cool. And, I remember going on the before social media was a thing, forums and chat rooms and IRC and shit. And then when social media started, MySpace and all this shit as it was coming out and growing, then Facebook, and the different stages of evolution that the internet became, is you start seeing that as an older person too. You get to go, oh, I get more access to my friends and my family, all the people I know. Oh, I get to, I type in a hashtag or I type in an interest, and there's 100,000 people at my fingertips who are interested in the same thing I am. And so I can reach a whole new community. I can reach a whole new bunch of people. And so you want to participate. You want to engage because we're human. We're social. It's normal. But what do you think that does to their mental health, Ken? For kids or adults?
Especially kids, because like I said, I think
kids. Oof.
What do you think that does to like their mental health when they seek that validation or that affirmation, or even the older people? Like let's face it, everyone has, not everyone, but like most people now have a smartphone, right? Who are in even first and even third world countries, and most people have some form of access to the internet, and obviously a lot of people have access to social media. What do you think that does to people's mental health and how they deal with other people?
So I think that kids are primed for failure with poorly set up restrictions and access to social media. Because right now, as much as I hate it, there is a fine line we have to walk. Because I have seen what happens with clients who have been taken completely away from social media. It's no different than if you isolate them in their house and keep them from their friends. Because that is how they learn to communicate. That's how they learn to talk. That's how they learn to socialize. It's what everyone else does. So, instead of going to, the tavern or the club or whatever the fuck it is to talk and hang out and shit, everyone does it on their phones or on their computers or on social media. So if you take it away from them whole cloth, then you're going to cause damage. No different than if you just give them unlimited access to them to do whatever they want and to do. Usually it's pretty common they tend to cross the lines of what they're supposed to do at their age, start doing shit they're not supposed to, and then it's going to damage them. There's a very, very fine balancing act of access, and one of the biggest things that comes with that, it's kind of touching back on earlier subjects, is having the ability for trust and dialogue with your kid. Because if you have that, then your kid will go, oh, okay, I met this person's kind of, I don't know, it seems a little weird. Let me talk to dad. And then your daughter goes to dad and goes, hey, dad, this person, I've been talking to them, they've been cool, but I don't understand what they mean by this. And that's where dad gets to go, oh, fuck no. This is why we're not going to continue this conversation, and it's an educational thing. You're not mad at them. You kept them out of a very potentially risky situation, and then they go back to doing what they're doing. If you don't have that in interaction or engagement with your kid, then you can't do that. So dad would be kind of pissed off if I did whatever. I'm just going to, it's whatever. What's the worst that could happen? Yeah. It's like the worst things you can ever hear a kid say. What's the worst that could happen?
What's the worst that could happen?
And then all the horrible shit happens.
Horrible. Well, Ken, there's been some like Dateline level stuff, and where those stories tend to lead. Like I said, parents are busy. Because let's face it, most parents, most two-parent households, or even single-parent households, the person's working, right? So they're usually busy working, and they do what they can for the kid. But the problem is, I don't know any parent that sits there and monitors every single last thing that their child does online. And
you can't, nor should you. Technically,
yeah. Because then you, like you said, that's when kids start getting burner phones. They start going to friends' houses, because it's like you want to have that transparency, but it's like, Ken, the thing that I saw in some of these Dateline stories was like the kid, whether it be male or female, they started with, like you said, going into certain chat rooms, going to certain places where they don't know that they're interacting with a grown adult. And they were manipulated into doing some stuff, right? Because like I said, they're
Easily.
children. They don't understand, like they don't see the same level of danger.
Their
Like
their
guys like you and
cognitive
I would see.
functioning isn't there yet.
It's not there yet.
Especially if they're like preteens or early teens. You're still getting to that, crossing that boundary, and depending on your puberty and development, you haven't yet had. Like I had that one kid that I just worked with who has a like genius IQ. They, for their age, have the probably the development, the cognitive functioning of almost an adult or an adult. That's how intelligent this person was. Like they were thinking at that level. Most kid, and like I had this kid and then another kid in the same place at the same time, and that same age, completely different level of cognitive development, nowhere close. And it was so interesting to watch because you have someone who's extremely. It's not that the other kid wasn't smart; they weren't cognitively as advanced.
Yep.
So when you have kids who don't understand the social cues or understand how this, when they say, "Oh, I like you. I want to know more about you," friends send pictures to one another because they think on the lower level because they haven't advanced enough. They're reading it exactly as it is. They cannot see the implications or the manipulation usually, unless it's so blatantly obvious that it's like something sticks out. And then hopefully they fine-tune some of their defense mechanisms for, oh, this might feel a bit unsafe. And then they have the access to someone to trust. That's why building up, learning to let go of things as a parent and building up rapport with your kid is worth more than sometimes punishing your kid.
Yep.
Because that's the situation that keeps your kid out of danger and that keeps them alive. And it's just, I hate to have to say it, but sometimes it's better to let certain things go or deal with a minor punishment versus what you might normally do, and reward the communication, because the communication will be what keeps them alive and keeps them safe and prepares them for success as an adult. Because, like you were saying earlier a bit about, having the negotiation. There are certain things you don't negotiate as an adult, and that's where part of that conversation is. The negotiation changes as you age, and it changes depending on what the expectation is. Expectations in the home are negotiable. School expectations aren't, because it's a rule of society. So that's a rule of society as a whole. So you've got to follow those ones. So and that same lesson transfers over to laws. When you become an adult, right? You have to follow school rules. You have to follow rules in society, the town and the state rules and the federal rules. So it's that transit. So there are ways to make that switch. It's just how you do it. And so always, 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 the number one thing you can do to help you as a parent and help your kid is communicate and set up realistic expectations and being able to communicate them, because you don't want your kid keeping everything from you. That is which, yes, teenagers are going to do that because that's what teenagers do, but you want them to be able to come to you and go, I had a really bad thing, or like I've had happen to me in the last month or two, I was raped. Having the kid come and tell you that and say, I was raped, because they don't trust anyone else, because they feel they can trust you. You want to be that person for your kid. You don't want that to be necessarily someone else. Now, if it is, that's great. They had someone else, but you would rather it be you. Or you would rather it never get there, right?
Yep.
Is you would rather it be, Dad, I think I'm doing something really dumb. I don't know if it's okay. And then it's just, okay, let's talk about it. And then you just talk about it.
I'd had that conversation with somebody, Ken, about, where they'd be like, underage drinking and stuff, right? Because a lot of kids cave into like peer pressure, blah, 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 right? Do you know what I think is a much better call? And this is a tough pill for me to swallow, because as you know, I'm very anti-drinking and drugs and all that. And I was like, I would rather my kid call me saying, Dad, I know your rules about drinking stuff. I had 2 beers. There's some girls that want to go out and, they're about to like, I've been seeing them drink a lot of drinks and they're staggering, but they want to go drive somewhere, whatever. I would rather be the parent that, like I said, I can swallow my pride and go like this. Just tell me where you are. Just stay there. I'm going to come get you. Rather than scold them, right? Or she's afraid to make that call. I would rather be the parent that, like I said, I'm just like, what's bigger? Because, Ken, you've heard these stories, right? Where kids
sadly I have
talk to their parent, right? And they get in that car. Ken, do you know that just happened in my backyard about a month and a half ago? There were some teens, 15, I want to say 16 or 17, right? They snuck out of the house and were in the hotel room, don't even ask, of a dude who was like 21, I believe, right? Something like that, 21,
Oh,
24. And they were
yeah.
doing, like basically having like a little hotel party. Well, guess what ends up happening? Due to drugs and drinking, they end up just smash. One of the girls I know passed. The other, I think, was like in like extreme critical, like we hope she's not a vegetable
Damn.
forever after this. And the dude, of course, because he was drunk, he came out relatively unscathed, right? And it's like all because, think about it, you would, even though they snuck out, it's like it kind of goes with what you're saying, Ken. Okay, the kids they didn't call you when they thought about sneaking out, right? They didn't call you once they snuck out. They didn't even call you once they got to the hotel party. But if there was like that last beacon of hope, you want the kid who was like this. I know I'm in big trouble, right? However,
Yeah.
these people have been drinking and using drugs. Let me at least call mom and or dad and say, look, I know you're mad at me. I know I snuck out. I know I did drinking and drugs. I know I was partying with kids who are above the age of 18. I know I messed up every step of the way, right? But let me at least get this one step right, right? They're getting ready to go drive a motor vehicle, and I'm calling you to let you know it makes me uncomfortable because Ken, you I'm sure you've heard those stories, right? The parent gets
yeah.
them, and then like you said earlier, you're trying to keep these kids alive, right? There are kids who
Sometimes,
hop
yeah.
in that car and they wind up never coming home, right?
And you don't want that.
Like that's how thin that line is between the kid who's like, I know I messed up, but let me at least call mom or dad. I know I messed up, but help, right? Help me.
So here's
Or
the way I would
somebody.
look here. If that was the situation, right? Say that one of those kids is my client, right? Say the kid that calls you, say it's your daughter, right? Your daughter calls you and says, "Okay, Dad, this is the things I've done, but I can't. I don't feel it doesn't feel right. Can you, please don't be mad. I'm so sorry. Please don't be mad. Can you please come get me?" Bawling their eyes out, all that fun shit, right? I would probably tell you in a family session that of all the behaviors they did that night, they held themselves accountable by making the right decision at the end of the day. So yes, they did and so that isn't something that would warrant a punishment to me because they made the right decision and chose to call you knowing that they might get in trouble unless you have something set up beforehand. Or even so, if you're going to get in trouble, that, okay, I'm going to get in trouble, but this is more important. And so that in itself, that act of accountability, the act of making the right choice, that is such a big deal, especially for a teenager.
Yep.
That actually deserves reward because that was what you want them to do. Because you're never going to go through a day and not make mistakes. They made the right choice when it mattered. Should they have snuck out? Probably not, right? You're a teenager, they're going to fucking sneak out. They're going to drink a little bit, they're going to do, whatever, okay. But when they were going to get into a car and drink and drive, and everyone's toasted, and it's really stupid, that's where that was the final move of the chess game.
Yep.
Do you make the move that ends it, or do you make the move that keeps you going for a few more rounds?
Oh, absolutely.
Even though it's a difficult few rounds because mom and dad might be mad, you still made the right choice. You have to reward that because that is the absolute thing you want to teach your kids as a parent. And that's the things where if you build that in early, you build that communication in early, then that's where if your kid is depressed, maybe they will communicate with you and say, hey, going back to the original topics, hey, I am depressed and I'm really feeling bad about myself, or I have been thinking about cutting my wrists, or, going outside or stealing dad's gun and shooting myself, and being very morbid. But these are things people do. You would rather them say that to you. You'd rather your daughter come to you and go, Dad, I've been thinking about killing myself, than for you to find her. Right.
Correct.
And so there are some in that, especially for kids, if you see them, if you know they're at risk because maybe of bullying, you see that maybe they have other risks because of other mental health things going on, you've got to make the right accommodations. Don't baby them. You can ask any one of my clients I've ever worked with. I have set high expectations for them, but because I will never ask them to do anything that they cannot do. Because as one of my philosophies, it's I will ask you to do things that will be hard, but they will be things you can complete and do.
Oh, absolutely.
Just like, so you can do it. It's about being able to choose to do it and actually following or attempting to follow through. If you trip, it's getting back up, figuring out why you tripped, and continuing on. And so as long as it's something like that, I will always support that. So the way I look at it as a whole is that is a core philosophy in what I do, because it's not fair to ask kids or even adults to do things that are unobtainable or
Yep.
unrealistic. That's why I like, as much as I hate corporate shit, SMART goals is one of the things I teach. If you know anything about corporate shit, SMART
Yep.
goals. SMART goals are really good ways to make goals. And it's a really easy way to break it down for kids too, and adults, but kids specifically, is here's a way to make a goal where you can make it accountable. You can put a time limit on it. It's something that you can actually do. It's not some, I'm going to lose weight this year. Well, it's bullshit goal.
Yeah. It has to be a little more specific. And
I'm going to lose 5 pounds by the end of the month.
Yep. And then here's the schedule for doing it. Well, the reason why I brought all this up is because I took my daughter to go see the movie The Black Phone, right, which chronicles the grabber, right, the guy who abducts children, right, and of course he does things to them, eventually, ends them, right. And I took her to that because she's at that age now where she can handle stuff that's a little more mature, and I grew up liking horror and suspense, and she has an inkling for liking that too. And of course, it's always good, daddy-daughter time, and taking kids out to the movies, eating popcorn, blah blah blah, spending my money, the usual.
Yeah, of course.
And I think about that as it's like they had a very strained relationship with their own father in that movie, and I think that strained relationship is kind of like because of the sense of isolation and him not being as resilient as he should have been. It actually made him a little more apt to get grabbed by the grabber, right? And I bring that up because earlier we talked about the lack of social skills with some of these modern kids, right? Where because online becomes their reality. One of the things I've told guys, like especially when I'm talking to my Discord to the young bucks, I'm like, look, man, and like I said, I had that conversation with Mama Vic. I'm like, you can have all the certificates, you can have all the degrees and all this stuff, right? None of that gets you as far in life as networking, right? Your ambition and your resilience, right? Because one of the things I keep noticing is that more and more of these kids, they'd rather sit, online forums, a lot of PORN consumption, right? And when they get into the real world, Ken, they lack those basic social skills that you need. And I think the reason why they lack them is because they haven't seen anything that really highlights that. Like I said, I was actually giving props to something like the Rippaverse, right? Eric July, he went out there and made his own comic thing, right? His own little multiverse or whatever, right? The Rippaverse. And I looked at that and I said, that's a good thing because a lot, especially with the boys now, because they get no masculine role models. I'm like, I think that there's more and more of these kids. They need to see that. They need to see the masculine role model, the masculine journey, and they have to have something that they can relate to. Because let's face it, Ken. You said it earlier. I think it's something that you can say to your clients when you say, I may not understand exactly what you're going through, but I've been in a dark place too. As opposed to, and this kind of goes with what I was saying, Ken, when someone gets a bunch of degrees, right? They didn't, they don't have the life experience. They just go like this, look at my credentials. And they have 50 different certificates and blah, 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 right? But they don't have real world experience. A kid who's going through something really taxing and really troubling, they can't really, connect with this person because they're like, you're just a guy in a suit. Whereas a person that goes like this, let me tell you about the dark times I was in, that's similar to what you're going through and how I felt, which is similar, because I think that matters because we need to continue to create more dialogue about this. And I do have a question for you. I want to make sure before we get out of here. Shaftesbury asked, and this goes into diet. He asked how often he recommends exercising and eating something that's not pizza, right? When someone goes, boo-hoo, my mentals. Because as you know, there's a lot of people who are, what do they call them? Something eaters. Are they like depressed eaters or something? Or emotional eaters, right? You've heard that term, the emotional eater?
I've seen it. I've done it too.
The coping mechanism, right? What do you think about that?
As far as why people eat?
Well, just the nature of that cope. Like, damn, let me just go ahead and start eating.
Some people, it's, going back to, it's more of a Freudian thing, or, the oral anal stages, whatever the other, the psychosexual stages stuff, right? Mm-hmm. It's some people have, if you believe that's a theory and it's a valid theory, it's some people need to keep their self busy. It's a way, eating does give you hits of, good neurotransmitters. It makes you feel good. Because, eating, you feel full, it helps keep you healthy, it helps keep you alive. So your body's like, oh, good, you ate, you feel better. So you feel a little bit better for that moment, but because you ate. And so what do? You eat a bit more because your body says, oh, hey, you ate, you're good, you're feeling better. And so it's no different than shooting up a drug because you're shooting up a drug in a different way. It's just a different way
quick hit.
And that's one of the things that when I talk to kids, especially kids, because kids, you have to be, in my experience, so fucking realistic and forward with, because if you don't, you set them up for failure. And the last thing I want to do is have a body on my conscience. And I have to my knowledge, haven't done yet. And I'd hope to never do. So, but the thing is yeah, when I, for example, using my own story, when I left the 2-day stay or whatever in the inpatient place, did I feel great? Fuck no, I still felt horrible. Did I feel a little bit better? Yeah. I had a different outlook on my life. I was hoping that I could do something different with it. I was hoping I could maybe feel better in the long term. You got to make choices that help you long term. So you got to make the things that help you, yes, a little bit now, but also a lot more long term too. So like, if you're that depressed and suicidal and reverting to negative things, like, something happens, your mind starts jumping to self-harm, and, you have to work on that, because yeah, you could take drugs and maybe feel better for a minute, but it doesn't help you, because you're not always going to have drugs in your system. Even if you're strung out, you're not going to have drugs in your system all the time. You're going to be struggling to be able to put them in your system because you don't have enough money. So how do you deal with it? You find a way to where, instead of that automatic thought going, I want to cut my wrists because it's something that makes me feel better, it's, I'm going to go draw. I'm going to go do an adult coloring book. I'm going to go play games. I'm going to go watch a Migtown podcast episode, whatever the fuck it is, to make you feel a little bit better, because there are things that are always going to negatively impact you. And if you start early with negative ways to deal with shit and you don't deal with it properly, and I'll hand out like sheets of like, here's 100 coping mechanisms, and I'm like, you'll probably cross everyone off on this list and go, none of these work, and it's a waste of it. Maybe it's a waste of a sheet of paper, or you find one and you start doing that. And that's one. You need like a dozen to start with, just to begin. For example, when I'm hitting really bad times and I'm suicidal and depressed or whatever, I have specific things I do that usually pull me out of it, that I have learned to do when I'm feeling that down, where I'm feeling so down, I'm like, I really don't want to live anymore because my depression's really bad. I go watch 2 specific videos on YouTube because they remind me that I have a purpose and remind me that my life does matter to other people. And it helps me come back to reality a bit and go, okay, it would really be a big deal if I was not here. And so that's the way I cope with it. So and then that helps me start, okay, I don't feel as horrible as I wasn't, I wasn't like I wasn't at the brim of jumping off a cliff, but I was feeling pretty damn down, or I was not feeling like long-term wanting to stick around. Maybe that helps me pull back a little bit, and then I can start using other coping mechanisms, because my other coping mechanisms probably wouldn't have worked right there, because I didn't think I was worthwhile for sticking around. So I have the things that help me make sure I'm here to stick around and have a purpose. And so you've got to have different ones for different purposes. Some coping mechanisms work for, small things. Some are the ones that you stick in the back of the toolbox and you start digging out in a rush when it gets really bad, because it's really bad. It's that emergency flare that you light. It only lasts for 30 minutes, but you need every second of that light. And so you light the flare, and you'll put it back later. You'll restock it at another time, but in that moment you need that flare, because it's dark and you cannot see, and it's really fucking scary there too. So you light the flare, you get a little bit of light. Oh, hey, it's not as bad as I thought. I can get a bit out of here. And that is not only something every person should work on, help other people work on it too. Generally I'm not a dick to people. You've known me for a bit now, well, you've had the opportunity to talk to me, and we talk behind the scenes, we talk on streams. Most people who interact with me, they would never think, I'm an asshole, or I don't generally do mean things, even with people like I have beefs with, or even with the people it cost me my job almost a year ago to the day, last year. I was mad, and as of like a couple weeks ago, I've forgiven them, because it gave me an opportunity to do something really good in the last month. And so I'm not really burnt or stung about that anymore. But I wasn't really necessarily so mad at them, or like it pissed me off, but it was like, I can understand, I try to put myself in the shoes of the person. So like, you think of all these horrible things, you think of the different people, you think of like the school shooters, you think of the different people that maybe we sit on a different side of the aisle or doing the things like taking away masculinity, sit in their shoes for a minute. Like, what is making them make those decisions? Do you truly understand why these people think the way they do? Can you imagine being the person who's at their lowest, that you're going into a school to kill a bunch of kids? What does that feel like? Can you really imagine what that feels like for a minute? Or is that beyond your own imagination? Think about that's just for the negative shit, right? Or someone who goes into a gang. Like, you're going into that because probably a bunch of different reasons. Usually subconsciously you're trying to replace the structure you didn't have in your household as a child or as a teenager or whatever. You want that adult figure, you want that role model, even though it's a negative role model. Just like the kids who have been horribly abused and neglected will say things and do things to piss their parents off, to beat them, because it's attention from their parent if they don't usually pay attention to them.
Yep.
As horrible as that sounds, they will do that. If they're normally not being paid attention to unless they do something to fuck up and get beat, they will do something to fuck up and get beat to get attention, because it's attention from mom and dad. You will be surprised at how common that can be.
Very
it's
common.
Really fucking it's a bit freaky to see sometimes, but holy shit, it does happen.
Oh yeah, provocation is normal. Well, I will let you out of here with this last question though, Ken. In terms of the future, wait, let me make sure I read that super chat from Frederick Little before I ask you your question. Frederick Little for $10 super chat, thanks for that. Says, always glad to see Ken on a Migtown live stream. Ken, let me ask you this: what do you see coming down the pike, like in terms of like like with men and women as a society? What do you see kind of coming down the pike with everything that you've noticed, right, from your vantage point?
Mm-hmm. It's a good. I think we're going to continue, unfortunately, as a society, continue to fight on each side of the aisle and continue to isolate to our corners. And it's the absolute opposite of what it is. One of the things I do, and I've always used as a debate and argument philosophy, is how I know I truly understand something really well. Like, I think I understand, like, for example, a lot of your views. Some of them I don't, some of them I do. But how I feel I could, and obviously you and I disagree on things a lot. That's fine. But how I feel I know and understand some of your views or other people's views is being able to make the argument and support them and make sure I know what's going into those thought processes. And so we should be doing that. Is if you don't understand why people are trying to destroy, for example, masculinity, get into their mindset, try to learn and understand, and be open to the experience for a minute, because maybe you'll change your mind, and learn, why does this person think that masculinity is such a bad thing, as an example, that they want to get rid of it, that all masculinity is toxic. Open the mind up and go, let me hear what this person's argument is. Is it justifiable? Do they have evidence to back it up? Maybe they don't. Maybe it makes no fucking sense at all. Or maybe something goes, that's a good point. Maybe it doesn't justify the rest of it. Maybe that's something I should think about. It's a very, very stupid argument, but, how I know I'm confident in my beliefs against, say, white supremacy is because I can make a very good argument is for why white supremacy is a good thing. I could make the argument. I can understand the justifications, but I don't personally believe it. But I can make the argument really well. It'd be a fun stream to do. But I could justify the shit out of why it makes sense to the people who believe it, but it's not what I believe. But knowing that I understand it helps me feel better about my beliefs and makes me more concrete in why I believe the things I do. No different than why I do things the way I do in therapy is because I've seen and heard feedback from clients as to why they do not like working with other therapists. And I've seen the benefits from doing it my way. And I've seen the negative impacts from the way other people do it. Any client of mine will tell you they've never had a therapist like me. The way I do therapy is really fucking unique. Apparently it works. I'll take it as a win. Maybe, some people will be like, what the fuck is this? But it works. But you got to find this, you got to have a real understanding of what you're talking about. And at the end of the day, that's why I do these streams, is I want to see more about your logic, other people's logic. Why, reading the chat, what's the justification? Why people have the feelings and beliefs and justifications. That's why I'll spend sometimes a couple hours arguing back and forth on a live chat or arguing in a Discord about different things, is to try and understand why people are having the decisions or making the decisions they are and what the rationalizations are behind them. Because knowing that, one, helps me do my job better as a person. Two, it helps me understand how to impact other people outside of counseling as a society, as a group, and what I do on YouTube or whatever it is. So that's probably my takeaway is if you want to help prevent this continued, backing into corners, hyper partisanship shit, listen, like legitimately open up and listen and ask questions to understand. Even if you do not like what you're hearing, just listen. You'll be amazed at how different it will change your perspective. And maybe it reinforces it and you can go, wow, that person's a fucking idiot. But you still get to go, I listened and I did the right thing to listen because I want them to listen to me if I'm telling my side. And then if you give them the respect to listen, they'll try and listen to you. And maybe you do win them over. Maybe you Google, maybe you do teach them, oh yeah, maybe that wasn't the right way to approach masculinity. Maybe that was a bad idea. Or maybe having dads in the home is a good idea. Maybe we should work on that more. That's the back and forth. That's what we really need as a society, in my opinion. So
I like it. Well, I mean, I just want to say this as we get out of here. First and foremost, Ken, thanks for coming on and having this discussion. And, I look at a lot of things that have happened and transpired, especially over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years where all this has kind of gone into hyperdrive with, what I call the howling madness and the craziness that has kind of been much more pervasive in society. And, there's a lot I don't agree with. And I will say this, though, in combating all of this, that's why I say RIP to the victims and survivors of all types, right? Of all types of, whether it be violence or abuse or whatever, because Ken, from your vantage point, there's a lot of people hurting. I see it from a different side, but I think that if you notice with a lot of us, as we start to talk more, we start to see some of the intersections, right? We start to see I'm looking at it yo, Ken, this is from my viewpoint. And then you're like, well, hey, you may see something early, especially because you're dealing with children earlier down the pike. You see what I'm saying? Whereas I'm seeing them from another side, and it's that we're all interconnected. And it's one of those things where I just want everyone to be better and to do better and to listen up, right? And for the people out there who are struggling, make sure you go get help, even, whether it be on this YouTube space, hearing, like you said, whether it be a podcast, going to you personally, Ken, channels like yours that deal with mental health and mental illness, things like that, for people to get that help, because there's a lot of people that just aren't even listening anymore. And I want to make sure that people know that there are people out there who do care. There are people out there who want to help you. And I want to let you guys get out of here with that. And Ken, you want to go ahead and shield, definitely go ahead and shield your material so we can get out of here.
Yeah, so if you liked what I had to say here today, or you want to come criticize me on my show, which I do get a bit, that's the link to my channel in chat. Ken's Counseling Couch on YouTube. You can also follow me on Locals. It's free to follow me on Locals. It's kenscounselingcouch.locals.com. If you like what I do and you want to support, you can super chat or during streams, or you can do $5 a month on Locals, get you access to my Discord, which Tim is corrupting another therapist in. I don't know if you've been aware of that, but yeah, Tim has been corrupting Tracy, who's a therapist, has been popping on my show for several streams. She's great. I'll also show her Calming the Chaos on YouTube. If you guys can also jump over there, check her out. She's a different perspective than mine. So if you think mine's different, check her out. You'll get to see kind of the different perspectives. But she has also, it's been interesting seeing her getting opened up to this side of the internet, because I don't think she's seen a lot of it. So I think it's been helpful for her, just like it's helpful for me to do these things. It's helpful for her and her practice and how she does things to learn more too. So check that out as well if you guys don't mind. So
much appreciated. Ken, thanks again for coming on. Everybody who was in the chat, everyone who will see this, thanks for tuning in. And we are out, man. Stay toxic, Kings.
Take care, everybody.